Hello and welcome to my channel NBSoundHopperUK, and the subject of this video will be 21st century alternative sounds from the USA in 10 albums. From my perspective as a British person, it appears to be extremely difficult for artists from the USA to get much attention or traction to broaden their fan base if they happen to be outside of the mainstream. When I say mainstream, I don't just mean pop music or anything radio friendly, but also genres that can often have a pretty rigid formula, for example, hip hop, country and metal. In spite of the difficulties a very regimented music industry and tribalism present, there are still a large number of artists who resolutely do their own thing. So in this video, I'll be talking about 10 albums by such artists from this century. With Cathedral by Castanets from 2004, alt folk might be one way of describing the album. Gothic country might be another. Either way, the groaning saxophone at the start of the opening track, Cathedral 2, Your Feet on the Floor Sounding Like the Rain, makes it immediately apparent that this is not a run-of-the-mill take on well-established genres. The sparseness is almost bleak, but terrific nonetheless. Another example is You Are the Blood. There are a few which are closer to traditional methods, such as Industry and Snow, No Light to be Found, Fare Thee Faith, The Path is Yours, and As You Do, but even these contain elements that stretch beyond genre norms. One of the appealing things I find about this album is the way it was recorded. It gives the impression that you're right there in the room with them while they're playing. Who were Castanets, though? It was one man, Raymond Raposa, originally from San Diego, who enlisted the aid of several guest musicians and vocalists. I've deliberately referred to the band and Raposa in the past tense due to the fact that he died in 2022 at the age of 41. And between 2004 and 2014, he released 6 albums plus a collaborative dubbed version of Castanets' third album, City of Refuge. At the Soundless Dawn is by the Los Angeles band Red Sparrowes. They were initially set up as a side project for various members of other bands, and they released this album, their debut, in 2005. To all intents and purposes, it's a post-rock album owing to the tracks all being instrumental and some of the guitar playing and songwriting techniques. There is also a metallic emphasis, and it's this that differentiates them from other guitar-centric post-rock bands such as Explosions in the Sky. The album title and the overall theme are a reflection on the possibility of what's known as the Sixth Great Extinction and how humanity is doing its bit to accelerate its onset. All 7 track titles contain at least 9 words, so I won't bother you or my memory by trying to name any of them. Suffice it to say, though, an album of this nature needs to be taken as a whole, so comparing tracks seems about as futile as comparing chapters in a book. If you like heavy guitar-based music and can take an hour without vocals and don't mind the kind of peaks, troughs and dramatics often associated with post-rock, this is the sort of album you might well end up playing and then wonder why it took you so long to do so. To me, it's a 10 out of 10 album. Next is Passover by the Black Angels. This is a psychedelic band from Austin, Texas, whose name is derived from the Velvet Underground's track, The Black Angels' Death Song. Passover, their debut album, was released in 2006. Being inspired by psychedelic music from the late 60s, although infused with a more contemporary discipline in song structures, means that you don't get any freakouts or jams. However, you do get the use of a drone machine by Jennifer Rains that gives intensity to many of the songs. The album's main theme draws on the parallels between the Vietnam War and the Iraq War, which was in full flow in 2006. Therefore, some of the lyrics are pointed. Mind you, song titles like Young Men Dead, Manipulation, The First Vietnamese War, and The Sniper at the Gates of Heaven make it possible to guess that before actually hearing them. Guitar pedals are used effectively, wah-wah on The First Vietnamese War, fuzz on Black Grease, and a bit of pseudo-sitar sound on Manipulation. On that track, using different vocalists for the verses and chorus also works really well. The hidden track at the end of the CD version of the album is a cover of a Jimmy Cliff song called Vietnam, with lyrics changed to refer to Iraq rather than Vietnam. and it underscores the album's concern about not learning the lessons from past failures. To say the self-titled album by Brightblack Morning Light is laid back would be a massive understatement. It has a swampy, woozy, psychedelic folk feel with touches of gospel in the vocal harmonies. Although living in Northern California, the band's mainstays, Nathan Shinywater and Rachel Hughes, come from Alabama, which might well explain the swampiness I refer to. When it comes to instrumentation, there's electric piano, bluesy guitar, restrained use of drums, and percussion with reverse cymbals at times adding to the atmosphere. There's also flute, sax, piano, and trombone providing nice embellishment on a few tracks. This album was released in 2006 and it was followed up by another in 2008 entitled Motion to Rejoin. However, there's not much progression on Motion to Rejoin, so the self-titled album is the one to go for. If you're in need of something mellow to listen to whilst partaking of whatever it is you like to relax with, this is a perfect album. There's nothing abrasive here. Pilgrimage by Om is where doom metal meets stoner rock, and if you want to hear a different take on the metal genre, then this is as good a place as any to start exploring. For starters, there's no electric guitar. What you've got is bass, drums, percussion and vocals. Yes, the bass gets heavy, but across the album's 4 tracks, it's melodic and hypnotic as well. There's a bit of psychedelia in the air also, because at times it sounds like a nod towards Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun by Pink Floyd. This was Om's 3rd album and was chosen as Mojo's Underground Album of the Year for 2007. The title track opens proceedings, and this is where things are the most Floyd-like. Second track, Unitive Knowledge of the Godhead, is heavier, with the bass becoming fuzzy and menacing, and as far as the drumming is concerned, extensive use of toms on the title track is replaced by snare and percussion. Beamer's theme, with the exception of a 3-minute or so bass and vocal section, is a hefty stoner slab. The album ends with a shorter reprise of the title track. The vocals are okay throughout and fit the general tone of the music. Thankfully, no Cookie Monsterisms included. The only downside of the album to me is the pretentious lyrics, which say lots and nothing at the same time. Other than that, a sterling effort. Before I go any further, here's a glimpse at what's in the planning stages for this channel. The next selection is Person Pitch by Panda Bear. Noah Lennox is Panda Bear. He's from the Baltimore area in Maryland and released his first album in 1999. He relocated to New York City in the early 2000s and co-founded experimental pop band Animal Collective. Not content to only release material as part of Animal Collective, he continued to record as Panda Bear. By 2007, when Person Pitch came out, he had moved again, this time to Lisbon in Portugal. That briefly covers who he is. What about the album? 7 tracks with multiple layers of looped samples over which Lennox plays and sings. It's very meticulously put together, wonky and experimental, yet still anchored to the world of pop, with no shortage of melody. The vocals are heavily reverbed and a strong Beach Boys influence is as plain as day. The density of layers and the reverb also evoke Phil Spector's productions. Uplifting isn't a word often used in association with experimental music, but it's a good fit in the case of Person Pitch. Each track has a feel-good factor, even the longer ones like Bros and Good Girl Carrots, both of which hit the 12.5-minute mark. The attention to detail ensures that, in spite of their length, they don't drift or become tedious. On the whole, a fascinating album, and Tomboy, the follow-up from 2011, is also worth a listen. Lotus Plaza, real name Lockett Punt, is another artist with a solo career while being in another band. He's a multi-instrumentalist member of indie rock band Deer Hunter. From a suburb of Atlanta in Georgia, In his Lotus Plaza identity, he's recorded 2 albums, of which 2012's Spooky Action at a Distance is the second. This has a nice blend of jangly dream pop, shoegaze, ambience, and a drop of background non-invasive dissonance here and there. It all works superbly well and is equalled by Punt's ability to come up with some fantastic melodic vocal lines and harmonies. There are similarities to Panda Bear in the way reverb is used on the vocals, although it's not quite as intense. The songs mostly have a bittersweet tone, and there are a few real gems. Strangers, Out of Touch, Monoliths, Jet Out of the Tundra, and Remember Our Days especially are all earworms. On the whole, I describe Spooky Action at a Distance as a great album to revive flagging spirits if you've had a trying day. Negative Fascination is the 7-track debut album by California-based John Juan Mendez, aka Silent Servant, released in 2012 and definitely one for fans of dark wave and more stripped-down techno. There's a tense and cinematic mood throughout the album. The opening track, Process Introduction, has minimal beats before something closer to an EBM rhythm sits in front of dark synth lines on The Invocation of Lust. Third track, Moral Divide, Endless, is my favourite. The drum machine rhythm in the foreground is very John Fox, with the synths creating a haunting unease. This arrangement of rhythm and dark, reverbed melody is characteristic of most of the album. The style of beats changes on other tracks, where there are industrial and post-punk influences on The Strange Attractor and Temptation is Desire, respectively. A Parthetonal breaks the mould by having no beats at all, but they kick back in on the final track, Utopian Disaster End. There was only one other Silent Servant album after this, and alas, Mendez died in early 2024 at the age of 46, a drug-related accident. Nevertheless, Mendez left his creative mark. Negative Fascination is an ideal album for playing in the dark and is a decent combination of contemporary and late 70s, early 80s electronic techniques. Now, if Silent Servant combined the dark wave side of post-punk with techno, Zeros by the Soft Moon adopts a more conventional approach by having bass at the forefront, with the chorus pedal evoking Susie and the Banshees. Keyboards play an important part without getting that close to techno. So if you're a fan of Susie and the Banshees, Joy Division, The Dance Society and The Cure, Circa Pornography and others in that vein, then this is an album well worth the effort of listening to. It's not all retro though, as the keyboards and the way the overall sound is mixed place the album firmly in the 21st century, 2012 to be precise. I wouldn't count that as a minus, as I'd say it would take an extremely fussy post-punk purist not to find something they like on Zeros. It Ends, Machines and the title track give the album a blistering start and the pace rarely falls back, making Zeros a breathless 34 minutes. It's an album that definitely benefits from being played loud. There is an unfortunate connection between Jose Luis Vasquez, who was the Soft Moon, and John Juan Mendez of Silent Servant. They were friends, and Vasquez died in the same incident as Mendez, Vasquez being a couple of years younger at 44. A sad way for both to end. Pedestrian Deposit are another lot from California. A YouTube channel, I forget which one, talked about this, their 13th album from 2019, as an example of weird music. Whilst compared to some other artists, I think that's a slight exaggeration. Pedestrian Deposit are certainly unconventional in combining industrial, modern classical, noise and music concrete, as well as other forms. Post-industrial is possibly the closest term that might apply. Dyer's hands can be challenging, but a reasonable stress tolerance is all that's required to get through it. The gentle start to Crow Theory quickly gives way to a 5-minute battering ram of distortion and white noise, with only rare traces of barely discernible rhythm, before the noise is stripped away and a distant mechanical semi-drone fades the track out. Fourth track, What Can't Be Taken, is like a switch on Crow Theory, where noise starts things off before quiet. Almost ambient industrial sounds occupy the rest of it. Second and third tracks, What Can't Be Given and Auger, are more atmospheric. the former leaning towards modern classical, the latter an electronic pulse that hints at exploding into something violent but doesn't. Great use of tension. The 18-minute final track, Beneath the Salt, has a long noise section sandwiched by two long modern classical sounding parts. If you prefer albums to have neatly constructed short songs, Dyer's Hands won't be for you. Although the technology is different, Pedestrian Deposit on occasions bring to mind the more experimental side of Can, so if you've adventurous tastes, this could be an album you'd like. One thing I didn't realise until I gathered up the albums to talk about was how many of the artists I've included come or came from California. Therefore, a few other non-Californian bands worth exploring are Magic Markers, Cloudland Canyon, Sunburned Hand of the Man, Holly Herndon, and Pneumatic Tubes. Regardless of who I chose to include or not, it's just the tip of the iceberg. As is well known, an enormous amount of energy and money is spent on promoting the same old faces and the same old sounds. However, beneath that surface, there has been a vast and varied amount of stuff coming out of the USA in the 21st century. Hopefully that continues to be the case as time goes by. Links to a track from each of the albums I've mentioned are in the video description, and if you've made it this far, thanks for watching.